Delphine, Lea, and I'm Sophia, and we are going to talk about ecosystem management in Ukraine. Because this is a very broad topic, we set us a special focus on forests. Our structure is I am going to give an overview of Ukraine's ecosystems, followed by Theo talking about Ukraine, a country in transition. Lea is going to talk about challenges for ecosystem management, and Nadine is going to end with opportunities of ecosystem management. Ukraine consists almost entirely of level plains at an average elevation of 175 meters above sea level. Mountains, like for example Ukraine Carpathians, cover approximately 5% of the land, and most forest covered areas are in the northwest. On the left side you can see the map where the main ecological zones are shown. In the north there's the mixed forest area, followed by the forest steppe area in the middle, leading to the steppe area in the southeast. Ukraine has a temperate continental climate, and the precipitation is disproportionately distributed and is decreasing towards the south and east. Agriculture is the main land use in Ukraine. In 2015, it covered an area of 68.7 million hectares. And this leads me to the fact that Ukraine has 25% of the world's Chernozem soil, also known as black soil, which is a very fertile soil, and this is very arable, and that's the reason why agriculture is the main land use. Over the last years, agriculture has moved to the forefront of Ukraine's economy. The basis of Ukraine's agriculture is crop farming, with main productions of grains and vegetable oils. And Ukraine is also one of the largest export countries of agricultural goods. In 2017, it has been approximately 44%. The main export crops are grains, fat and oils, and oilseeds. Now I will talk about forest and forestry. The forests of Ukraine occur in 3 natural zones, as I said before already. The forest coverage is 16.7% at the moment, which leads me to the fact that Ukraine counts to one of the countries with the lowest forest coverage in Europe. 11% of that forest is located in protected areas, and the forest ownership is divided into 86% owned by the state, 13% communal, and 1% privately owned. 10.4 million acres are forestry land, of which almost everything is covered by forest. The present growing stock is 2.1 billion cubic meters, and in 2019 the volume of harvest has been 21 billion cubic meters. The common tree species in Ukraine are pine, oak, spruce, and beech.
Alright, I would like to now give you a short overview about the history of Ukraine, and especially focus here on the economic side of this issue. As you will see in the next slide, Ukraine's economy is still trying to find new directions, because the transition of economic systems is not completely finished. Well, I guess I have to start with the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 and how Ukraine came from a state-command economy to a more liberal free market economy. This transition has been quite hard on the population, and this is due to the fact because most of the institutions on all levels of the country have been more adapted to the old system. So it still requires a lot of time and effort to make this change happen. As you can see here, or as you can see in the next slide, factory closures and vast unemployment have been huge challenges for Ukraine in this time. Alright, as you can see here, Ukraine's economy has been going through a lot of struggles lately, and as pointed out by the red arrows, you can see the major disturbances in the history since the breakup from the Soviet Union. And well, this situation had major consequences on all levels of the country, including the forestry sector. And as you can see, the independence or the breakup plunged the economy into poverty, and also followed by the Russian financial crisis in 1996 was a huge blow. After that, it's you can see a huge increase after the Orange Revolution, but two critical hits have been dealt by the global banking crisis in 2008 and in 2014 the overthrow of the Yanukovych government, followed by the loss of the Crimea. So to put legislative efforts into power was a major issue over the last years, and as you can see, a lack of market power hindered the development of the forest sector and rural communities. This left the implementation of structural changes inside of the country, so hence also the forestry sector, quite weak. Well, now another question should be raised here, which is who actually owns the forest sector in Ukraine? And to go deeper into this question, we first have to talk about the Land Code, which is a law which was passed in 2002, and as a consequence, private land ownership was legally enabled. So it can be considered quite a big step, because slightly opening up the market to investment had a lot of critical voices within the country. And up to today, the Ukrainian forestry sector, and I think first I have to define that, I mean the land ownership, forest enterprises, and wood processing companies, is still largely owned by the state. So you can see the state hand of regulation remains, which comes with an insufficient division of powers, rights, and responsibilities, as well as economic parties. So this remains the question. So the question remains: how fast can change be implemented here? Alright, so this leads me to the Forest Code. And the Forest Code is the central document of forestry legislation and can be considered the foundation for sustainable forestry in Ukraine. It has been revised about 30 times since the implementation in 1994. The aim is to regulate forestry management in modern socio-economic conditions. This includes conservation, the improvement of wood quality, and sustainable forest management, as quoted in the Forest Code. The responsible state authority is the State Forestry Committee. And however, these laws can be seen as quite modern forest management systems, and they can be considered more formal, they are more paper laws, because they can't really reflect the reality in Ukraine. Because the forest management systems that have been existing since decades haven't been really changed since the Soviet days. And again, the question remains, have legal innovations provided the results for sustainable forestry that were hoped for? There are several assessments, for example, from the World Bank and NGOs like Earthside, which show that the regulations still contain various loopholes and uncertainties, which leave a lot of room for interpretation. Yeah, so it's not as clear as you might think.
Now I'm going to talk about some further challenges for forest management in Ukraine. First of all, there's forest loss due to agriculture. This is mainly young forest that's 10 to 30 years old and it's getting cut back. This happens mainly on abandoned agricultural land. So forest got planted on abandoned agricultural land, and because the status of the land did not change, the forest can be cut back without any legal consequences or problems. Another challenge for forest management in Ukraine is the military conflict that's going on in eastern Ukraine right now. There's pollution that is coming from household waste that cannot be collected due to the system that's not working. There's destroyed infrastructure and military equipment that's getting left behind, that's polluting the environmental system. Furthermore, there are forest fires and mechanical damage that destroy forests. And because there's insufficient coordination between armed forces and environmental bodies, it's hard to stop this destruction. Here on this map, you can see the damage to natural protected areas is all over eastern Ukraine caused by the war. Another challenge that's not only facing Ukraine is climate change, but it might face Ukraine more than other countries because Ukraine is in the transition zone between mixed forest and steppe, which means that this hotter steppe climate can cause a further decline in forest and can cause a bigger hazard for the forest. This can lead to forest fires, like in April 2020 when 11.5 thousand hectares near Chernobyl burned down. An radiated area like Chernobyl burning causes other problems, but this would extend through beyond the scope of this work. Other problems coming from climate change is the extreme weather, like flooding and a large-scale dieback of conifers. My last point I want to raise is like illegal logging, because 40% of the timber that's cut in Ukraine is cut illegally. This is because there's corruption at many levels in Ukraine, and it's possible through a loophole that allows sanitary cuts. This means that sick trees can be cut even in protected areas. And if you want to read more about this topic, I can highly recommend you the Earthside project report that's written in 2018 and highlights the corruption in illegal logging in Ukraine.
As we heard before, some challenges of sustainable development in the Ukraine are low incomes, a high unemployment rate and job loss, and limited educational possibilities for the locals, which leads to a depopulation of rural areas and is surrounded by a low level of social standards among the population. The possibility of generating an income through the operation of illegal sawmills and illegal logging pushes rural people further away from sustainable forest management. Such threats and stresses must be addressed through ecosystem management. For example, in order to reduce illegal logging and therefore promote ecosystems affected by it, there are various measures that can be taken. These include, for example, increasing the welfare and reducing unemployment, strengthening the public control, implement forest certification or increase penalties for illegal activities in the forest. An important aspect is the involvement of the community in the planning of forest operations. In 2008, the term ecosystem-based adaptation was coined at the Conference of UN Climate Conventions and finally officially defined at the 2009 Conference of UN Conventions on Biodiversity. EBA offers a repertoire of approaches to adapt the management of ecosystems to climate change and therefore to counter the vulnerability of human communities. As an interface between adaptation to climate change and socio-economic development and biodiversity conservation, and with approaches for sustainable management and restoration of ecosystems, and the fact that the approaches are cost-effective and accessible to poor rural people in developing countries, they provide a good base for responding to the above-mentioned threat, stresses, and contributing factors, and implementing sustainable forest management, among others, and are well suited for the ecosystem management in the Ukraine as a country in transition. As you see, a current example in which the approaches of ecosystem-based adaptation are used is the project Ecosystem-Based Adaptation to Climate Change in Regional Development by Empowerment of Ukrainian Biosphere Reserves, which was started in 2018 and will end in 2021. In this project, the focus is on preserving, regulating, and buffering ecosystem functions and restoring them as far as possible. One aim of this project is to actively involve the public and therefore raise awareness of the effects of climate change. To do so, for example, an ideas competition, workshops with experts and citizens, or legal recommendations are planned in which the local population can participate and work on adaptation strategies. By involving international, national and local decision makers and various stakeholders from public, civil society and private sectors, corruption and the lack of political coordination and cross-sectoral coordination can be counteracted. Another good example project to promote understanding, acceptance and recognition by the local population of the importance and conservation of the forest is called Carpathian Biosphere Reserve Challenges and Solutions for Protected Area Management in Ukrainian Transcarpathia. The entire concept, which follows an adaptive approach, could provide, among other things, a base from which new jobs could be generated in the future. The CBR is a good example as a motor for sustainable development in the region, which can be an opportunity to dealing with the forest ecosystem with a benefit for the regional population. Money is generated, for example, from the sale of firewood or entrance fees to the reserve. The services provided by the reserve's primeval forest are not only for the well-being and health of the local population or visitors, it also stimulates tourism in the region, which in turn strengthens the economy of the region. A reduction in forest conflicts, such as those arising in the forestry sector in Ukraine, and an improvement in attitudes towards the forestry profession could also be a positive effect of such a project. These projects are as mentioned before, like the CBR project, might contribute to solve the problems and challenges related to ecosystems that exist in the Ukraine. At least I would like to talk briefly about methods and the videos we found about our topic. For this video, our main research question was, what is the current situation of the forest in Ukraine, where are the challenges in forest management, and what are possible solutions for those? We struggled a lot to find videos online that gave an answer to this question besides the ones that our professors uploaded during the course in the blog week. Furthermore, did most of the videos we found not match a scientific standard. But it was not only the lack of scientific content that caused difficulties at this topic, also the setup of platforms like YouTube does not allow specific research. As we continued our research outside of video platforms, we came along a lot of different scientific sources that helped us to answer our research questions. And it's important to note that most of the resources we use for our presentation are reports from foreign sources. Most of the research coming from Ukraine is written in Ukrainian and therefore was not useful for us because no one of us is able to speak Ukrainian. So if you like to read more about those topics, you can use our resources at the end of the presentation or look up our topic site at the World Lecture Project. We hope you enjoyed our presentation and wish you a nice day.